Amidst the rubble in southern Lebanon, children's belongings lay scattered in the debris. A teddy bear, a small shoe. The strike happened in the early hours of Saturday morning. Lebanon's health ministry say at least 10 people, including 2 children, were killed. The engineer working on the site said the building was used by civilians for civilians.
This is a civil establishment that works on metal trade for hangars, false ceilings and ready homes, and has nothing to do with military things at all.
The Israeli military said the airstrike targeted a weapons depot used by Hezbollah militants. The aftermath of the strike weighs heaviest on the relatives of those killed, whose despair is clear to see. The weariness of grief takes hold. The strike is among the deadliest in Lebanon since the Hezbollah militant group and Israeli military started trading blows from October the 8th last year. Southern Lebanon wasn't the only target overnight. Central Gaza was hit too. This is the town of Zawada. Neighbours here say a meat wholesaler and his family, including 11 children, are among the dead. The scenes of grief replicated. The Israeli military said it was aware of reports of people killed in an airstrike and they were looking into them. Now there are even more evacuation calls in nearby Maghazi district. But where will they go? To add to the misery of war, the Palestinian health minister confirmed the first case of polio in the Gaza Strip today, a disease not seen there for 25 years. The UN are calling for a polio pause for vaccines to get to the 1.2 million children who desperately need it.
Gaza is in a humanitarian freefall. Just when it seems the situation could not get worse for Palestinians in Gaza, the suffering grows and the world watches.
A ceasefire deal, in their view, needed now more than ever. There were tones of cautious optimism about the talks in Qatar coming from President Biden last night.
As of an hour ago, it's still in play. I'm optimistic, not far from over. Just a couple more issues, I think we got a shot.
He's dispatched his Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, who will arrive in Israel on Sunday for an in-person diplomatic push. As well as international pressure, the Israeli Prime Minister is still facing domestic scorn from a number of hostage families. Some of them believe the latest round of talks is the best chance of bringing their loved ones home. After more than 300 days of captivity, 300 days of war, the end can't come soon enough.
Well, to discuss the prospect of a ceasefire in Gaza, we're joined by Nomi Bar Yaakov, who's travelled the world negotiating and mediating in international conflicts. Nomi Bar Yaakov, so we heard from Joe Biden that he thinks peace is closer than ever. Is that a sort of, triumph of hope over experience, or could it actually happen?
It could happen, but for that to happen, quite a number of things need to fall into the right place. And on Monday, United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken is going to meet with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, and he's going to present the bridging proposals to him. And Netanyahu has been stalling the ceasefire and making it near impossible, or impossible thus far, to get to a ceasefire, is going to have to make a tough decision, for him tough, whether to continue the war and keep his government, his coalition government in place, or whether to do the right thing, get to a ceasefire, free the hostages, and start paving a path to reconciliation and peace.
But why would he do the right thing, in your words, when it's not in his political interest in terms of political survival?
No, it's not in his interest, but the question is, what is the cost, rather than the leverage, that the US is willing to inflict on Israel in order to make sure he signs on the dotted line? And that is the question. And if President Biden, through Antony Blinken, has worked that bit out, then Netanyahu will sign on the dotted line. Because Israel cannot survive without US support. Israel is 100% dependent on United States support for its own survival. And Netanyahu knows that.
You've been involved in these kind of talks many times. So what would you be saying? How would you bring the two sides together?
Well, at the moment, it's not a question of bringing the sides together. It's a question of bringing each side to agree to the proposals. And if the proposals are such that no changes were made from the Biden statement on the 31st of May, then indeed Hamas have already said that they would agree. And that's why they didn't participate. So the only question is, are they going to get Netanyahu to sign? And in order to get Netanyahu to sign, they have to exert a cost that he can't fathom. For example, if they stop, first and foremost, the 2-ton bombs shipment. And it's not only military aid, there's trade. I mean, the huge, as I said, Israel cannot survive as a state without US support, and the Prime Minister knows that, the Israeli Prime Minister.
So if you were in that room, you'd be issuing a quite explicit threat, really, you know, that the US would withdraw military support of the kind you've talked about.
Yes.
If
Not only that, I think they would also increase the sanctions. They've already started sanctioning a small group of settlers, but I think they will sanction and threaten to sanction many, many more, including some close allies of the Prime Minister.
You focus very much on Israel, but Hamas today is indicating that they think this idea of progress and hope is illusory.
Correct, and that's why I said it's a question really. Hamas have said that they're not going to change their stance. And therefore, it's very clear. They have been very clear from the outset. They have been crystal clear about what they're willing to accept and not willing to accept. And what they are not willing to accept is an Israeli presence in Gaza after the ceasefire. Yeah. So, and what Netanyahu wants is he wants to resume the war. And that's the main issue that needs to be bridged. Right. And that's a question of language and finding the right language and giving a little bit of maneuver for both parties so that they can start the process and really get into the nitty-gritty details.
I mean, is the pressure, the desire to avoid a wider regional conflict sort of focusing minds, do you think, at this stage?
Yes. I think that is definitely focusing minds. I think they realise, I think everybody in the world, I think, that knows the area, that the Iranian threat is very serious and Hezbollah's threat is very serious. Hezbollah has the military capability of hitting anywhere in Israel with great precision and in great depth. And they also have the capability of assassinating senior Israeli leaders. And given that Israel has assassinated very senior IRGC, Iranian Revolutionary Guard commanders. They assassinated the political leader of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, on Iranian soil in an Iranian Revolutionary Guard compound. And they assassinated the number 2 in Hezbollah. So they're carrying out very, very high-level assassinations. And it wouldn't surprise me if Iran and Hezbollah would be planning for something similar. They're definitely planning for something different to anything we've seen before.
So get the deal done before that happens.
Exactly.
Is what you'd be saying to Israel.
Yes.
I mean, you saw fresh Israeli attacks in Lebanon, Hezbollah retaliating in some measure. What effect will all that have on these talks going on next week?
Well, I think, again, it's a question of how you want to look at it. Some people are saying, oh, these actions are intended to thwart a deal. But I actually think it's because of the pressure of the deal that Israel is trying to carry out as its policy is to assassinate Hezbollah leaders. It's a stated policy. I think it's a failed policy, but that's the policy. And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to get in as much as they can on the military side so that they can claim, quote unquote, victory.
Right. Nomi Bar Yaakov, thank you very much for joining us.